Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
Last week was our first playoff game, and my plaque psoriasis was so itchy under all my gear. Sometimes just thinking about scratching could take me out of the moment. And then my doctor told me I could get clearer skin with a pill called Otezla.
Otezla apremilast is a prescription medicine used to treat adult patients with plaque psoriasis for whom phototherapy or systemic therapy is appropriate. Otezla can help you get clearer skin after just 4 months.
Okay, ready for the next game. Talking to my doctor about a pill was a total game changer.
Don't use Otezla if you're allergic to it. Get medical help right away if you have trouble breathing or swallowing, swelling of the face, lips, tongue, throat, or arms. Severe diarrhea, nausea or vomiting, depression, suicidal thoughts, or weight loss can happen. Tell your doctor if any of these occur and if you have a history of depression or suicidal thoughts. Live in the moment. Ask your doctor about Otezla. Call 1-844-4-OTEZLA or visit Otezla.com for prescribing info about cost, and more.
Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. I'm Rachel Tenney, and here we learn all about plants, how they work, how to care for them, and it's all taught in a way that anyone from beginner to expert can listen to, understand, and enjoy. So I hope that you will join me in Plant School. Hello and welcome to the Plant School podcast. We have another great episode today. I had the opportunity to have Marjory Wildcraft on, and we had such an interesting conversation about gardening and the importance of starting your own garden right now. Before we dive into this conversation that I had with her, let's quickly do our giveaway winners. I do this every single episode where I take a winner from Apple Podcasts, someone who has left a review on that platform. And then I also take another winner from Spotify, someone who has left a comment on the most recent episode, just so that I can hit the two main platforms that I know you listen on. What you win as a giveaway winner is a package from Market Botany. The owner, Cameron, he was actually on my podcast not too long ago, but he created this product called Prop Drops. It's a water propagation aid. I love it so much. So he's going to send you that and a bottle of their Leaf Shine. If you want to check out their product, you can use code Plant School Podcast for a discount on your order, or you can try your hand at our giveaway that we do every single episode and comment on Spotify or leave that review and you will be automatically entered in. All right, so this episode's winners, let's start with Spotify. Normally with each episode, I will verbally ask a question that you guys are welcome to respond to, or you can just leave any comment of any sort. And so today's winner is Rachel of Autocun. I hope I'm saying that right. And she said, just found this podcast and loving it. Friendly, fun, and informational. Thank you, Rachel, fellow Rachel, for tuning in. I really appreciate you being here listening, for commenting. Go ahead and email me at tennyplants@gmail.com. That's TENNEY plants@gmail.com. I'll get your address and we'll get that package sent your way. Moving quickly over to Apple Podcasts, someone who has left a review. Their username is Erica Frank 0, and she said, love this podcast so much. The layout and execution is phenomenal. Diving into the nomenclature and brief background of the plants is just informative enough to not overload your brain. Thank you so much, Erica, for that kind review. Go ahead and email me as well at tinnyplants@gmail.com. I'll get that giveaway package sent your way. If you would like to win next week, feel free to comment on Spotify. Feel free to leave a review. I really appreciate your guys' love and support. It means the world. And for those commenting on Spotify, since I normally ask a question that you guys can respond to, for this one, I would simply like to know if you currently garden. And again, if you don't want to respond to that prompt and you just want to comment on Spotify something else, that is totally fine too. It does not matter to me. I simply love hearing from you guys. All right, and with that, let's dive into my conversation with Marjory Wildcraft. I am so excited for today. We have on the podcast Marjory Wildcraft, and she is the founder of the Grow Network. She's the author of The Grow System, and she actually does webinars on growing food. We're going to learn all about that today as we talk with her. And I first, as you introduce yourself, Marjory, I also am interested, how did you first become interested in gardening, and how did that all start for you, from the beginning?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I'm not, my parents were not hippies, and I didn't grow up in a commune, and my parents were not farmers, so nothing like that in my background. In fact, my first degree was in electrical engineering, and my family was a little bit poor, and I had always had this vision of living overseas, and I managed to land a job with Motorola. I was a section manager of engineering in Hong Kong, managing the network there. And Hong Kong Chinese are very interested in money also. And they said, hey, Marjorie, you got to go to this class. It's a really interesting class, all about money. And I said, it's by this guy, Robert. I said, do we know this guy, Robert? And he said, no, we never heard of him before, but it's really good. And I didn't know anything about him either, but I went, went over. And it blew my mind. I was like, wow, I was so inspired by the teachings this guy had, that I ultimately left engineering and started a real estate investment business in Austin, Texas. And that business was so successful that Robert came back to me and said, hey, would you be in my infomercials? And that's how I was on national television for 4 years with Robert Kiyosaki selling Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And, I'd made my first $1 million by the time I was 40, super happy, living what I thought was life, right? I thought that's the way we play the game in this realm. And I had 2 little kids, and I do a lot of community work, and I was volunteering on this one project that I thought was just kind of innocent, had no idea it was going to completely, it's like the Mack truck experience, I just completely changed my life. And that was, we were trying to get locally grown organic food into the elementary, into the school system. And we were going to start with this one small rural elementary school. And I'll never forget the night that whole project collapsed. I organized the meeting at the Red Rock Community Center, and it just became apparent that there were not enough small, organic farmers in all of Bastrop County, and Texas has some big counties, to provide even part of the vegetables for one small rural elementary school. And so I was like, wow, I knew that food traveled about 1,400 miles on average, and 10 calories of energy went in to get 1 net calorie of food to you, which was part of the reason I had volunteered on this project. And then there's only 4 days worth of food supply in the grocery stores. And I was surrounded by 20 million Texans who are armed to the teeth, right? And I'm like, oh my God. And so I had this big realization about wealth, and that there are scenarios where no amount of money will get you food. There's, which was shocking. I mean, I felt like God had just picked me up and shook me. For hours I shook. For years after, I had panic attacks and night sweats, and I just said, well, whatever I've been doing in my life, I sold the real estate business and got rid of everything, and said, I have to learn how to grow food, and I have to teach people how to grow food, and we have to rebuild the entire food supply from the ground up, which starts with backyard food production. So that's how I got started. It was not an easy start.
So is that the basis of the Grow Network that you started in 2009? Is it just helping people grow food in their backyards?
Yeah, well, I'd started out with, I went out and learned everything I possibly. I took all the gardening classes, read all the books and workshops, and, anything I could do to figure out how to grow food especially under duress, under, hard times. The stores are boarded up. The trucks aren't running, as well as good times. But, how do you grow food, right? How do you feed your family? And it took, a few years to really get processes going. And one of the first things that you're going to learn when you start growing food is that you can't, the biggest myth in the survival and preparedness industry is that of the lone survivor. You need a community. And so right away I learned, well, my neighbors and friends. And so I started organizing what I had learned into a class, and that was doing so well. I mean, we'd have, somebody call me up and say, hey, I've got 20 people. Can we be at your farm next Saturday? Because, we'd moved out of the city and started homesteading as a part of this whole thing. And if you've ever organized anything, you know how extraordinary that is. And everybody kept telling me, you need to turn this into a video or something to, you've got to get this out to more people. And so I did. I took a bunch of time off to write the script, and then back then video editing was very expensive and time consuming, not like now. And we created the video. And honestly, I loved growing food so much that I really didn't want to create a business out of this. I just wanted to grow food for the family. But it'd taken about $30,000 of our family savings to, the website, the first DVDs, the inventory, the video editing, all the stuff. And I had to find a way to pay back that money to the family, our coffers. And I found out that just because you put something up on a website doesn't mean anything. And so the Grow Network was born. I was like, oh my God, so I got to figure out how to sell these videos. And then I started finding more problems, as I was hanging out in these circles of people that live like right off the land, I was finding out, oh my God, there's all kinds of ways to treat infections without antibiotics that have been done for thousands and thousands of years. And I got the guy who taught me, he lives out in the wilderness a lot of the year. I got him on camera to teach us how to treat infections without antibiotics. I just kept finding more and more things, so we were making more and more products, and eventually the whole Grow Network turned into this whole thing. And like all these resources that you do need in a collapse scenario, or even without it. Right? We are in collapse now. The food supply is completely toxic, and the medical system is not at all about medicine. It's about profit. So, that it's there is sort of an illusion that it's actually worthwhile.
Yeah. Was your family supportive when you decided to kind of walk away from the corporate world and get into homesteading? What was their thoughts behind this?
Well, it wasn't the corporate world. I had my own business. I was a professional, investor, real estate investor. And honestly, another reason for ending that was my husband did not like that business. And so when I said, hey, and he also had never lived in the city that much, and he didn't like it. We were in South Austin. Lovely, lovely house, big land and backed up to a creek, but he's a country boy. And so when I said, hey, I think I want to sell the business and let's move out to the country and homestead, he was all in for that. He didn't. So there were a lot of other pressures for why the business needed to end. For example, I could foresee, we were buying single family homes and selling them on a wrap. But I could see that 2008 was going to happen. I was very early, and I said, well, let's get out because, otherwise we'll go under completely. So, he was real supportive of it, and he ended up finding other consulting work, which, and some remnants, what was left from the business held us through. We bought the land, and I just basically went to full-time homesteading, homeschooling, being mom, and then a few years later starting the Grow Network.
That's amazing. So how long has it been since you decided to homestead?
Yeah, I'd say, I was really starting to get that wake-up call was really starting to happen around 2002, okay. 2003. We bought the land in 2003. So, like I said, with the real estate crash, I was real early on that. I've been real early on things, but I do see them coming. So, yeah.
That's really cool, though. I think you've been doing it for over 2 decades now.
Yeah.
Do you look back and are you happy that you made that decision and what you've grown?
I am thrilled with it, honestly. I will tell you, and if you aren't growing your own food, and for those of you that are watching this, you're not growing your own food, I'm going to tell you, it's so humble, but it's the answer to so many of your problems right now. So I was a complete wreck, It has healed me on every level you can imagine. On the physical level, I used to have horrible allergies and things like that. That's all completely gone. Emotionally, I really don't care if the stores close because I know how to produce food, right? I know how to take care, I know basic skills to take care of myself and my family and my community, right? Also, you know, emotionally, mentally, there are reams of studies that show that when you eat a higher quality diet, so clean food, fresh food, nutritious food that's not got, you know, all the chemicals in it, you score higher on intelligence tests. You're more intelligent. And then spiritually, you know, when you're working with your hands directly with the earth, and you're creating food, and you're creating beauty, and you're creating wonderment, you're creating healing and health, magical things go. I'm just, you know, when you get into it, it's amazing what will happen because you're dealing directly with creation, which is not normally a force that we're working with. And but when you do this, you are. So it's just, it'll heal you on every single level, and it has healed me. And like anytime something really horrible happens in your life, in the moment you're like, oh, that's horrible. Now I'm like, thank God, because you know, I mean, if I hadn't have done that, what I'd be worth, I don't know, 20, $50 million, and I'd have real estate, and I'd be doing this, and that's, you know, that's a life. But the life I've had now, you know, there are many millions of people that I have helped. I've helped. We are in collapse right now. It's happening right now, and I've helped many, many, many people prepare for this, and that to me is so much more worthwhile than just having made a big pile of money.
I love that. You have a lot of wisdom. I don't think a lot of people see the world the way you do, and it's refreshing already just talking to you for these few minutes to hear that, because I don't think a lot of people would have the courage to walk away from what you did. I want to ask you, so like, where does someone start in growing their own food? Because you came from some place where you did have the capital of your real estate investing to take and work with. But how does like the average Joe who might not have a whole lot of money, where do they start?
Yeah, it's actually really easy to do. And, you know, all these years of trying to get people to grow food, I have been able, and all the different, there's thousands of ways to produce food, you know, calories and nutrition. And I have drilled it down into the 3 easiest and simplest and fastest ways. The other thing is I've realized human beings generally don't do something until there's a crisis. You know, I didn't, right? And so I've also figured out what's the fastest way to take somebody who has no experience, maybe they're older, they're out of shape, or, you know, like so many Americans now are ill with something, you know, some kind of chronic disease. So how do you take somebody like that and get them able to produce a lot of food, at least even half of their own food, and most people, you know, in a suburban backyard, a small backyard. And so I created this webinar, which I've been giving away for free for years now, and it's at backyardfoodproduction.com. And there I show you the simple 3-part system. And it's really simple. It's a small garden, some chickens and a small rabbitry, and you can produce half of your own food in your backyard. And with this system, actually, within just a few weeks, you can produce significant amounts of calories. In fact, you'll have your breakfast taken care of for the rest of your life. So, yeah, it's the most enjoyable thing you'll do every day.
When you started this, how old were your kids?
Oh, yeah, my kids were, let's see, I had one was like 3 and the other one's 1.
Okay.
So, yeah, when you're looking at little kids, you start getting interested in nutrition like moms, right? Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm kind of in the stage of young kids, and I'm just thinking if I were to step away more from our like store-bought foods and just go in hard on my gardening and canning those things so that they can last us throughout the year. Was it like hard for your kids to get used to eating from the land, or was it pretty easy for you?
Oh, no, that's actually surprisingly easy because when you're growing really nutrient-dense, real food, they love it. They really, really love it. I'll tell you a story. I was doing a small school garden. Mostly homeschooled my kids. My daughter went to kind of like a collective, and they had where all the homeschool kids and each of the teachers would come, and parents or whatever would teach. And I had a little gardening thing. And a lot of the other kids their families did not have the same values that I had on food. And in fact, a lot of them thought like a Lunchable was a big deal, right? Which I was horrified to see these kids eating that crap. And so we built a little raised bed garden, 50 square feet, 4 feet wide by 12 and a half feet long or something like that. And the kids had fun building it. And then we filled it with soil and we planted it and put in things that would grow at that time of year for us, which were like cherry tomatoes and chard and broccoli and sweet peas and things like that. This is Texas in the fall, so this is what you can grow at that time. And I thought, and when I saw those Lunchables, I thought, oh my God, this may be the biggest mistake I've ever made in my life. But this is what I do. I'm going to do it, and I'll suffer those consequences. And so to kind of make it a little bit easy, we put those little cups of ranch dressing in the fridge, and we said, anybody on break, if you want to go out into the garden, chard and kale and all that have these big leaves and they grow a lot. And I said, if you want to go dip it in the ranch dressing and eat a leaf, you're more than welcome to on break. And those kids loved that stuff. In fact, after a while, we didn't have to have the ranch dressing anymore. And on recess, they were headed out to the garden and snacking, and they loved it. And a lot of these kids had never even eaten a fresh vegetable in their entire life. So,
Wow.
There's something innate about your physical body that your body knows good nutrition and it wants it.
Mm-hmm. That's so interesting. I'm so glad that you were there to help out those kids too. I think it's a little bit mind-boggling that we have gone so far away from farming and to working like with the earth. I can't remember the exact stat, but I'm sure people have seen those stats of like, oh, from the 1950s to today, we've like lost 90% of our farmers. Yeah, which is,
it's true. Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
And backyard food production. People don't realize how important backyard food production is. So yes, we've lost a ton of farmers. We're losing a ton of farmland actually. But what's more important, since the Victory Garden movement, which was the last big gardening push, we have not been doing backyard food. Because everybody, we want color televisions and college degrees and fast cars and all that. And I mean, that's all I knew when I was growing up. But in the 1990s, the USDA did a study, and they took seed catalogs from 1890 and seed catalogs from 1990, and they did a comparison, and they found, I don't know, I think it's like 86% of the seed varieties are no longer in existence. They're gone.
Man.
We've lost it because, perpetuating seeds as people grow them and perpetuate them, right? And we used to have regional seed banks where you could grow seeds and sell them and that kind of thing. Now we do have a few seed vaults in the world, which I'm a little concerned of. The primary one is Follesvard, which is way up in Norway, I think just right next door to Santa Claus, honestly, somewhere frozen. But it's owned by Bill Gates and all the big Googles and all that stuff. So it's, I'm not sure that is the best custodian for the world's genetics. That's another conversation we can have. But since we've stopped doing, and that's why it's so important for you to start growing food, is because we need to, and genetics is the key reason. For a local food shed to work, you need to have about 70% of people doing backyard food production.
Wow. I'm just wondering, so when you had this kind of moment of realization, and you said it kind of led to some panic attacks and things like that, and this is kind of off on the side from our main conversation, but like, what was the scenario you saw that was giving you that panic? Was it just people not having access to food and not knowing how to even grow it? Or what was that?
Yeah, that's it exactly. There's a saying that we're only 9 meals away from anarchy, and it's true. We all saw during 2020 how fast that like toilet paper can disappear. Right now, the price of eggs shot up. The wholesale price went to $9 a dozen, and now I think it's back down. But so a lot of people went out and bought chicks to have laying hens. You cannot buy a baby chick right now. And I've gone to a lot of the different hatcheries, and I said, hey, do you have, you go on their websites, and most of them say, no, there's never going to be any available this year. And some of them say, buy them now, we may be able to deliver them in October. But there's absolutely no chicks. And the same thing happened in 2020 with seeds, garden seeds. Because there isn't a huge market, it doesn't take much for that entire market to get bought out. And seeds are not something that you can print with a 3D printer. You have to wait until, a full year or a full season for more to be produced. Now, seeds are an incredibly abundant thing, but, it's hard to go from like 5 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour with agriculture really quickly. You just can't do that. So there's a very real scenario, and this is not, I can give you another example of how fast things can happen. So in Weimar, Germany, and this is the most likely scenario in the United States this year, and probably most of the countries that depend on the United States. In Weimar, Germany in 1922, people were grumbling. Price of eggs had gone up 300%. They cost 3 marks for a dozen. By October of that year, it cost 1 billion marks for a dozen eggs. So in basically 9 months, the currency was completely useless, absolutely useless. And quite frankly, a lot of people died. A lot of people committed suicide. The people that were hurt the most were those pensioners that got money from their retirement plans that don't grow by billions of a percent, 9 months, And yeah, that's why I was so concerned in Texas, because everybody's armed. So, that scenario, that's the scenario why I was so freaked out. And I said, I've got to do whatever I can do to prevent that. And the most important thing is individual self-reliance and teaching people. And historically, we know over and over again that this does happen. Cuba, I went to visit Cuba in 2012. Now, the Cuban economy, when the Soviet Union collapsed, what Cuba used to be totally dependent on the Soviet Union. They grew sugarcane for the Soviets and sold it to them at a high price. It was kind of a really cozy relationship they had. But when the Soviet Union fell apart, the last Soviet ship pulled out of Havana. The economy in Cuba dropped 60% overnight. The lights went out. The water stopped running. There was basically no food. The average Cuban lost 20 pounds. We don't accurately know the death rates because governments tend to not tell the truth about that. But I interviewed people, and it was horrible. It was just horrible what happened there. So it can happen very, very quickly. And that's why I was completely panicked and freaked out and afraid. And that's why I'm actually on this podcast with you right now, is talking to you and saying, look, you guys, this is happening right now. You have a chance right now to prepare, and it's really going to be the most wonderful thing you do in your life. But, we just saw, I don't know when you're going to post this video right now. It's April. We just saw huge drop in all the markets, in the Dow, the S&P, actually basically every market there is. That is your indication that it's beginning. Doge has uncovered that the U.S. government has printed many more trillions than anybody ever thought. And as they keep uncovering more and more trillions, what that means is the value of the dollar keeps dropping and dropping. We've got a trade war going on with Trump being told to announce all these tariffs. And we're going into a trade war, which means prices are going to keep escalating just because of that. So there are patterns in history that repeat over and over again. And so like the Roaring 20s, and then the Depression, and then World War II. So we've just had, the Roaring 2000s, early 2000s was a really rip-roaring time. We're now headed into that Depression era. And we're very likely to see a really hard time here. So that's why I'm here. Really?
We're shipping Easter gifts with a rapid-fire round of questions. Ready?
Yes, my gift. Can you pack it?
Yep.
Ship it.
Yes.
Guarantee it.
Of course.
Oh, send gift baskets?
For sure.
Protect electronics? Dog-proof it? Return it if they hate it?
Yes, no, and yeah.
Are you the UPS store?
Hey, we have a winner!
Visit theupsstore.com/guarantee for full details. Most locations are independently owned. Product services, prices, and hours of operation may vary. See Center for details. The UPS Store. Visit a store today.
Hi, this is Debbie, your Blinds.com design consultant.
Oh, wow. A real person.
Yep, I am here to help you with everything, from selecting the perfect window treatments to...
Well, I've got a complicated project.
Oh, not a problem. I can even schedule a professional measure and install. We can also send you samples, fast and free.
I just might have to do more.
Oh, okay.
So the first room we're looking at is for guests.
Shop Blinds.com now and get up to 45% off with minimum purchase. Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions may apply.
Yeah, with that in mind, does that, like, knowing that there may be a recession or even a depression on its way, does that affect you, or do you feel very, like, comfortable with where you're at because of that decision you made over 20 years ago?
Yeah, well, let's be very clear. We've already been in recession for quite a few years. You know, I'm a small business owner. I'm in contact with a lot of other small business owners, and I do not care what the government statistics. Government statistics are, you know, they should get an Emmy for fiction or something, because they're absolutely incorrect data, right? The unemployment rates, all that stuff is completely made up, and it's made and presented to you to make you feel good. But that's not what's going on. And actually now we're headed into a de facto depression. And actually, I think we're actually going to be seeing this hyperinflation and currency collapse this year. In fact, we're starting to see the edges of it now. So I've had a lot of years to get used to this, and I've done my best to prepare myself and to prepare my family and to prepare my community. I don't think anybody's ever really going to be prepared for this as it unfolds. You know, you still have some time to do the best you can and get ready. I think it reminds me of my mom died when she was 94, you know, and we knew at the end that, you know, she's getting older. So we weren't surprised when she died, but you know, there still is a shock to it, no matter how much you know intellectually something, right? So, yeah, I've had a lot of time to adjust to this and realize there's going to be a lot of violence, a lot of loss of life, and a lot of chaos. The more people that are growing food and becoming self-reliant and preparing, the easier this transition is going to be. So that's why I do the work I do.
So if someone is limited on space, because in highly populated areas, most people don't have access to a yard or a garden, what is your advice for them, and how much can you realistically grow in a small space?
Yeah, well, in a backyard-sized space, as I said, that webinar, even if you're inexperienced, you're older, you're out of shape, it's at backyardfoodproduction.com. I'll show you how to grow at least half of your own food, and that's assuming you're a beginner. And there are lots and lots of examples of where you can just produce way more. In fact, it's only the size of 3 parking spots. Now, if you're living in an apartment or a condominium, there's also a lot of things you can do. And I would still recommend you watch that webinar, because it'll teach you a lot of really basic principles that you need to know, even if you're in an apartment or a thing. And a lot of translate. You can do sprouts, and you can do herbs in the windowsill. You can do plants in the windowsill. I had a friend of mine in Colorado during the winter. She had huge sliding glass south-facing door, and she had this gigantic cucumber plant growing, cucumbers all winter long in there. A girlfriend of mine, I set her up with, she has a quail cage in her living room, and quails produce, you know, quail eggs. It's not quite chicken eggs, but she had 10 quail, and she gets about 10 quail eggs a day, which is basically breakfast, you know. So there's a lot that you can do. And then I'll tell you, if you open your heart and your mind and you say, hey, universe, and if you have a religion and you want to refer to a God, that's totally fine. But I like talking to the universe. I'm like, hey, universe, I need help with this. This is the question I have, you know, how can we help people who live in apartments and condominiums grow more food, right? So I put that question out there, and you can do this too, and you will get answers. And I'll tell you, one time, the one funny answer I got was my teenage son was growing psilocybin in the closet. And so we dealt with that as parents, you know. And then I'm like, oh, wow, there's the answer right there. People can grow mushrooms in a closet. You can grow mushrooms in an apartment or a condominium. So you have to be prepared for the answer to come from any direction. That's the thing. The way the universe wants to talk to you is, you know, the universe, like a book will fall off a shelf and there'll be a page with the answer, or you'll suddenly see a billboard differently and there will be the answer, or you'll happen to have a conversation with somebody you hadn't talked to in years and they'll be like, oh yeah, you could come in my backyard and grow food. I don't mind, you know. I mean, just open yourself up and ask sincerely. And the universe, it wants you to be successful. It wants you to be healthy and happy. It really does. And it will, you know, but you got to listen, you know, just ask questions and listen. So some people call it prayer, and whatever religion or organization or however you want to, you know, translate that into, but that's the basic principle.
With these webinars that you're doing and on your website, Backyard Food Production, are you also, is it encompassing teaching people how to store food? Because I feel like that's half the battle to have it last you.
Yeah, I totally agree. So the Backyard Food Production is just an introductory webinar to get people oriented. And then I have a whole academy, and it's not very much. I think it's only like $20 a month. And we have classes on canning, we have classes on foraging, we have classes on almost any kind of food production you want, ducks, sheep, gardening, you know, even making whiskey or growing cannabis or beekeeping. You know, so we have all these classes in that academy. By the way, everything is completely downloadable. And I really do recommend download all of it, you know, and if you're on a severe budget, just buy it for a month and download everything. So I think it's like $20 a month or something like that. So once you take the webinar, we'll have your email, and then we'll be sending you all kinds of fun stuff. We have a newsletter that comes out 3 times a week with just practical, useful information, and occasionally an offer to buy. We try to support local farmers as much as possible. So an offer from a local farmer, we try to resell their products because we're trying to stimulate more local business again and get that going. But yeah, if they take that free webinar, then we will introduce them to all kinds of stuff. So that's the best way in.
Gotcha. And what do you wish people knew about backyard food production? Are there any misconceptions that a lot of people hold?
Yeah, I wish they knew how enjoyable and wonderful it is. I mean, really, I just so look forward to the time I'm going to spend with the plants and the animals. Your cell phone and water and dirt do not generally mix, so you're going to be away from that, which is really healthy for you. You'll be outside in fresh air and sunlight, and it really is just the most joyful. And when you start producing your own things, you know, there's this incredible pride, and then your health is going to turn around. I think it's a gigantic psyop that they tried to not have us growing food. If you look at every movie you've ever watched, the farmer is portrayed as an idiot, right? Or somebody who's growing food, it's maybe some doddering old person that's already got dementias, you know what I mean? Or it's some desperate migrant worker that can't do anything. You know, they really portray it, and I think that that's very intentional, because the more that you have self-reliance and independence, the stronger you are, the clearer you think, you know, the less governable you become. So I did a series of podcasts with these really, really high-level people, like a CEO of a high-tech startup with $25 million seed funding, or a executive with 2,000 people in his division or whatever. And they all spent a half an hour to an hour a day growing some of their own food. Very, very high-power people. They clearly could buy anything they wanted. But they did it because they just said it was the most enjoyable, it was the best way to relieve stress for them that they had ever found. So, yeah, it's a wonderful activity.
That's so interesting. It's interesting that when you have whatever you could want, that they still needed that time out in the garden. And what I think is also interesting is, like, I feel like sometimes science is always a little bit behind of proving things. But there have been studies that have come out that the bacteria in the soil, of course, helps you release serotonin, that happiness chemical. And it's like we know that we feel better when we garden, but to have science there proving it and why it does that is just so interesting to me. And I wonder if there are like so many future studies that could be done on why we need to reconnect with food production, with the soil that we just don't know about yet. It's just interesting.
You know, you can do your own study and go out and start a garden.
It's very
true.
true.
You know, it will help you with security. It'll help you emotionally. It'll help you in so many ways. So, at this point in time, I'm kind of done with people studies and science, and all. Science is so bought and paid for by big corporations or whatever. You know, you don't need to tell me, go out, I'm going to do it. I want to experience it. That's what I really recommend. You go out and experience it for yourself and you'll know the truth.
I love that. Well, Marjory, thank you so much for coming on. I feel like this has kind of lit a fire under my own butt to get out and get gardening. I'm excited to check out your webinars. But quickly, before we end, I do want to ask you, you mentioned backyardfoodproduction.com where they can find those free webinars, but where else can they find you, keep up with you, and get into this community where you are sharing all this valuable information? Yeah,
my Substack channel, I'm really getting big on that, and I'm trying to upload something almost every day on Substack. So that's probably the best outlet right now. But definitely watch that free webinar because you'll be empowered, you'll be inspired, you'll be ready to go. You'll go, oh, I can do this. I can grow food, and you can, and it's the most wonderful thing that you'll ever start doing. When I look at this collapse that's coming, that we're in, I shouldn't say that it's coming. We're in it. I'm actually really excited about it because, as I said earlier, you know, people don't change until there's a crisis. The food supply is completely toxic. Right now, it is devoid of nutrition. It's like really doesn't make any sense to eat it, and I don't eat much of it, and I don't recommend anybody eat much of it. And I've been like really trying hard to get people to grow their own food, which is the best solution. And honestly, they have not done it. And I've said, okay, well, we're going to have a crisis someday, and then they will. and again, going back to Cuba, rates of heart disease, rates of cancer. COPD, all that stuff dropped after they basically had to switch to backyard food production because there was no other food. So everybody basically got healthier. So, you know, it's going to be a good thing. It's going to be tough, but it's a good thing.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think you're doing such an important work by empowering people to feel like they can do it. And it's something that is accessible to anyone. Like you gave all those examples of just small ways you can do it. And I also love that you brought up in the beginning the importance of community, because sometimes I get very nervous, you know, of what's happening in the world. And I have to remind myself, humans, we're resilient. It's going to be hard, of course, but communities can help each other. And, you know, humanity, I believe, for the most part, there are lots of great people out in the world, and you can, you know, come together and help. So I love that you brought that up in the beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I fundamentally believe in the goodness of humans, and a lot of the systems that we have in place now, I think ultimately will be revealed that it's actually not. Ultimately, the structures we have were not originally and currently being controlled by humans. So that's a whole nother conversation. But I do believe in humans. You know, during crisis, now the news will show, like during Hurricane Katrina, you know, the news will show you someone running around with an AR-15 or something like that, which may have been a paid actor, we don't know. During most crisis, people help each other. I live in Puerto Rico, and I was talking to a friend of mine, Sandy, and she's going, should I get guns? Now, I've lived in Texas long enough. You better believe I have guns, and I know how to use them. I don't think I'm going to need to. I said, Sandy, when Hurricane Maria hit here, we're on the west side, kind of in a small town. I said, how long were you without power? And she said, oh, 5 or 6 months. I said, was there any looting or plundering or any violence? She said, no. So we all kind of worked together. I'm like, yeah, that's what humans are.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I agree. Well, thank you so much, Marjory, for helping other people learn about gardening, for kind of bringing this to light, because I think it's an important topic that we probably don't talk about nearly enough.
Yeah, well, thanks so much, Rachel, for having me on. And let me talk to you and talk to all of your community. And listen, we really are in this, and it's going to become more and more abundantly apparent, even within weeks and months. I mean, it's going to become very, very obvious. And, you know, as I said, supply of chickens can disappear in overnight almost, you know, the seeds, other things that you need. Now, there's going to always be a way to do something, but the easy ones, if you get started now, it's going to be easier. The early adopters have the advantage. That's what I like to say.
It's so true. It's so true. And thank you so much for spreading that message. I appreciate that.
All righty. Well, we'll talk later. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being here and for listening to the Plant School podcast. I hope that you will join me for our next episode. And if you would like to support this podcast and keep it going, there's a link down in the show notes of this episode where you can donate to this podcast. And I really appreciate all that help. Or you can go to my merch store, which is also linked in the notes of this episode. And you can find some really cool plant-related shirts and stickers. And if you want to support the podcast but spend no money, feel free to share it with a friend, leave a review. All these things greatly help me out and allow me to keep doing this. Again, thank you so much for listening and for being here at the Plant School podcast.